Passives of champions have always been relatively key to just the strengths and weaknesses of every champion really. And throughout the years we've seen a ton of variety in how passives end up working in a bunch of different champions, and there's some really cool effects, but they're never really even on power levels since some champions have like super powerful kits with maybe a weaker passive, or some champions are just entirely based around their passive, so the rest of their abilities are a little bit weaker or just have interactions focused on their passive. Either way, passive abilities introduce a ton of variety into the game, and we've already taken a look at basic abilities and at ultimates, so we thought it'd be fun to rate each passive ability against each other and count down our list of the top 10 most powerful passives in League of Legends. And as always, if you guys enjoyed the video, definitely hit that like button, and big thanks to Pro Guides for helping us out with this video. They do a lot of really awesome content on their website, and they have a free trial so you can check it out. You don't have to hear it from me. There's gonna be a link in the description, and let's get started. Coming in at number 10, we have Malzahar, and for the longest time, his passive wouldn't have actually made this list because it was pretty underwhelming, but this rework gave him Void Shift, a new passive entirely, and it's honestly really strong, and is a big part of what made Malzahar such an overpowered champion upon the release of his rework. Being able to avoid just a ton of damage or crowd control from his passive is super awesome, and it means that he can get away with a ton of free poke in lane because the enemy's harass is just going to bounce off his passive, and then he can chill and play passive until Void Shift kicks back in and then go in for another trade. And the problem with Malzahar before this passive is that his kit kind of wants to like push lanes a lot, play very aggressively positioning wise, but he never really had a failsafe to fall back on, or some like sort of defensive tool when he got caught out of position, and Void Shift gave him one of the best survival tools in the game, and if you time it right, you can honestly just dominate a lane without worrying about enemy junglers or anything like that really, because the passive is just going to protect you from everything. And especially, it's going to protect you from crowd control effects when you use your ultimate, which is another big thing that allowed Malzahar to get a huge level in power. It does take a little bit of practice to use this passive effectively though, and a lot of the strength is in how you use it personally, but if you're using it optimally, it's super powerful and definitely earns a spot on our list. League's newest champion, Kled, is dropping in at number 9 with his passive, Skarl the Cowardly Lizard. So Kled is a champion, first one on our list, who's pretty much entirely based around his passive actually. And so it works by giving him a mount called Skarl that gives Kled bonus health and does all sorts of interactions and stuff, and it's really versatile because the extra health he gets at level 1 makes him a really powerful duelist. And you even get some invulnerability frames when you lose Skarl, so you can use it to tower dive really early on, which is actually pretty gross sometimes. And it's a little bit similar to how Nari's Fury maybe work. You can also build up courage in a fight to get Skarl back in the mid fight, which can also allow you to do some really crazy comeback plays and all sorts of stuff. And overall, a lot of the power of his passive is based on his other abilities, which is why it ranks a little bit lower on our list, despite the fact that his entire kit is pretty much based around his passive. But overall, it's a pretty powerful mechanic, and just plays such a huge role in making Kled who he is, and so it definitely earns a spot on our list. At number 8, we have Aurelion Sol with his passive Center of the Universe. Some champions do have their entire kits based around their passives, and Aurelion Sol is a pretty solid example of that. Center of the Universe gives Aurelion Sol 3 stars that orbit him and give him a lot of really awesome sustained damage in fights, and he can position himself to get constant hits from his stars, and it leads to just a ton of damage that can be really difficult to avoid and really effective in fights, especially when he combos it with his W Celestial Expansion. It just gives him a ton of damage, and it makes him a disgusting lane bully that can just sit back and CS, push lanes, or honestly just force people out of the lane, and it really just all comes down to his passive. And despite the fact that his entire kit is based around his passive, we rank him a little bit lower because, a lot of the power budget is in his W, but most of Aurelion Sol's power does lie in his passive overall, and while the passive itself isn't actually that overpowered, it just generally makes the rest of his kit pretty overpowered because that's what his kit is actually based around. Or, as Riot would say, the way they would explain it, most of Aurelion Sol's power budget went to his passive and the way that he revolves around it, and overall gives him a ton of power and makes him a great champion. Number 7, we have Yasuo with his passive Way of the Wanderer, and it's split up into 2 parts. So the first part is called Intent. Of course, it doubles his critical strike chance, and the second part is Resolve, which gives him shields after he moves around for a while. And Way of the Wanderer is really crazy because it means that at 50% critical strike chance from items or runes, he's already critting on every single attack, and that's pretty hard to deal with, and it gives Yasuo a ton of damage, a ton of burst, and it means he can build a lot of different offensive items because he doesn't actually have to build 100% crit chance. And alongside that, thanks to the flow stacking so fast while he's dashing around, it lets Yasuo negate just a ton of damage over the course of a game, and it leads to some really frustrating situations where a Yasuo might escape with little to no health thanks to the shield from Resolve, and combined with the mid-game powerhouse that is Intent, Way of the Wanderer is an incredibly powerful passive. And the last one before we break into the top 5 is Kalista at number 6 with her passive Martial Poise. Something both MOBAs and RTS games kind of share is this idea of orb walking, or like stutter stepping, where you attack and then you move and then you attack and you move, and you essentially use that as a way to kite your opponents and so on. And it really does a great job of letting you kite enemy units and also stay mobile while dishing damage, and it's really important, it's a really powerful mechanic to learn as an AD carry player. And Kalista's passive gives her a free dash on every auto attack, so she does this way better, way more consistently, and way easier than all other AD carries because of this, letting her jump back and avoid damage pretty naturally overall. And being able to stay so mobile is just insanely powerful, and it's often pretty underrated actually. And it's really a huge part of what keeps her alive in fights while you do damage as an AD carry, so getting a passive that just makes you the best orb walker in the game by far was always going to be crazy strong on an AD carry specifically. And I mean, Kalista has to take so many hits to the rest of her kit, like her basic attack damage, some of her abilities, like her W isn't really that powerful by itself, just because so much of her actual power budget is balanced around her passive. In the number 5 spot, we have Katarina's passive, Veracity, and it's probably one of the more simple passives on our list, but it's still crazy powerful. Gives Katarina a 15-second cooldown reset on enemy deaths that she contributes to, so kill or assist, which means it fully resets the cooldown of her Q, W, and E, and takes a nice chunk out of the cooldown of her ultimate, letting her keep spamming her combo pretty much every time she picks up a kill. And it's a really fun mechanic, but it's also really powerful and can just get out of control crazy fast. And it's the main reason why Katarina is considered a champion that is super easy to get pentakills on. You know, assassins are all about looking for single enemies that you can jump on and kill, but thanks to Veracity, Katarina can turn that one kill into just 5 if she goes unchecked, especially when you consider the fact that she has so much area of effect damage. And the best news, if you've seen our future rework of Katarina video, you're going to know that Riot is going to keep her passive as a part of a reworked kit, so this one's not going away anytime soon, and it definitely earns a spot on our list. Next up at number 4, we have Gnar with Rage Gene. So Gnar is another champion that is pretty much entirely based around his passive. And while he's mini Gnar, he gets to build up a resource called Fury, and at max Fury he turns into Mega Gnar, gets super tanky, and of course gets access to his pretty insane ultimate. And Gnar is considered to be one of the best initiators or perhaps playmakers in the game, and it really all comes down to the fact that he has this super cool transformation from his passive, and the passive itself is honestly just really powerful in lane as well before level 6 though. You know, if you trigger the transformation during a fight, you get a ton of health, you get some nice tanky stats, which can be enough to swing a fight in your favor completely, and it can really take people by surprise. And the abilities he gets access to once he finally does hit Mega Gnar are just incredibly powerful and overall make Gnar an awesome champion. At number 3, we have Evelynn with Shadow Walk, and really the only thing better than temporary stealth is of course permanent stealth, and when Evelynn's out of combat she gets stealthed pretty infinitely and also regenerates mana faster as well as ignoring unit collision. And it really lets her pull off some sick surprise attacks and move around the map unnoticed, which might not sound as crazy as orbiting stars or cooldown resets, or it's not really that flashy of a passive, but it's still insanely powerful, and without it Evelynn would just be nothing. And it's really only held in check because the rest of Evelynn's kit is entirely balanced around how impactful Shadow Walk is as a passive effect. And playing against Evelynn is something that's really frustrating, and you literally have to pink ward like crazy all over the map to survive against a good Evelynn player, and it's really just all because of her passive, and as a result it makes her a really powerful champion. In our number 2 spot, we have Braum with a passive that most support champions can really only just dream of. Concussive Blows causes Braum's basic attacks and Q to apply concussive blows to his target, which stacks to 4 times and eventually stuns them on the 4th stack. And the power in his passive really comes down to the synergy with the rest of Braum's team, because allies can, stack his passive for him once he gets someone marked. And it really means Braum can stun everyone with just great consistency, because once a target is marked, it's really easy for an ally to get the last auto attacks in for the stun, and it makes him one of the best level 1 champions in the game, a favorite pick for invaders, and has made Braum an incredibly powerful support pick throughout time. And the passive really just gives him so much crowd control power, which is really what you need as a support. And when it comes to Braum, I mean, the only reason you really play him is for the passive and his shield, and his passive really just enables so much presence and fights and allows him to do so much while also contributing damage and crowd control, and all it really takes is just one little auto attack or a Q from Braum, and the rest of his team just follows him up, and it does so much for what you would want from a support champion, and as a result, it turns out that free crowd control effects are pretty damn good, and it makes Braum earn the number 2 spot on our list. And finally, with our number 1 choice, we have Annie with her passive Pyromania. This passive is pretty simple, you know, after casting 4 abilities, Annie will stun enemies based on her next ability. And the reason why it earns the number 1 spot is really, when it comes to Annie, the entire reason why you play her, why you pick her for your team, is because of her passive. Thanks to her low cooldown, she can charge Pyromania really quickly, and because it stuns any targets it damages, her AoE abilities let her just stun entire teams with her passive alone, make some crazy plays, pull off some amazing one-shots, and she doesn't really need to put herself in any sort of risk like Braum to activate it, thanks to Molten Shield giving easy charges, and it can also be used to just dominate 1v1 effects, blow up entire teams with her ultimate, and pull off all sorts of really incredible plays. You know, Pyromania is a crazy powerful passive, and it's so strong that people used to pick Annie support just to use her flash ultimate to abuse it, and crowd control is always going to be a crazy powerful tool to have access to in League. And although this effect might not be as complicated or as flashy as some of the others, it's really what makes Annie who she is, kind of like Braum's passive, and crowd control is just an amazing tool to have access to in League, especially when it's area of effect or can be reapplied on multiple targets, and just getting it so often for free without worrying about cooldowns is really powerful, and a great Annie player can just stomp other champions in lane thanks to her passive. And Annie's passive is just so versatile and has so much power, and as a result, we believe that it earns the number 1 spot as the most overpowered passive in League of Legends. And that's going to wrap up our top 10 passives for League of Legends, and as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts on our list. Maybe just tell us some cool experiences you had using some of these abilities, or perhaps maybe what you disagree with. And looks like that's going to be it for me. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like, subscribe if you want. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.
Truyền thuyết về Miss Fortune. Xinh đẹp nhưng đầy nguy hiểm. Trên thế gian này rất hiếm kẻ có thể hợp với Miss Fortune. Là một trong những thợ săn tiền thưởng khét tiếng nhất vùng Bingerwater. Ả ta trở thành một huyền thoại dựa vào những xác chết bị những viên đạn xuyên qua hay những kẻ đã bị bắt giữ. Âm thanh của cặp súng chết chóc vang vọng khắp một thành phố cảng đầy mùi hôi thối. Còn những túp lều lụp sụp kia chỉ có được sự bảo đảm một khi con tàu săn tiền thưởng chìm xuống. Tuy nhiên, không phải lúc nào Ả cũng được gọi là Miss Fortune. Một thời Ả đã từng được gọi là Sarah, cô con gái yêu quý của một người chế tạo súng nổi tiếng, người đã sống một cách hòa bình tại hải đảo của mình.